XR is the greatest technology for empathy to ever be created. You can literally see the world through another person's eyes, and with such level of detail that anything else is second to none. Even if we try to put things into, documentaries and whatever else, it still doesn't compare. You're still able to look around and be taken out of the experience. But with VR, that it matches the way that your head moves, it's going to keep you immersed.
You're listening to the Bacon Bits and Bites podcast, and I'm your host, Karen Swizik. This is the podcast where a bit of business and a bite of technology come together. Every month, I interview entrepreneurs, investors, startup founders, and people in tech to learn about what drives them and what makes them tick. A social media futurist, Eugene's forward-thinking attitude towards how we connect using technology has been at the forefront of his mission to connect the world. In 2014, he graduated with a BA in Liberal Arts with an emphasis on YouTube studies from Evergreen State. Upon graduation, he went to work at the YouTube consulting agency Press Play. In 2016, he quit his job as an art director to pursue XR social media. Eugene's first project was producing the film Journey VR. This film became an official selection at SIFF, a staff pick by Adobe and Veer, then would become the #1 360 video download on Steam for 30 days at the time of its release. A year later, he would produce and host Glitched, the first in VR talk show to be ordered if it were a TV show. The show revolved around interviewing large-name tech and social media influencers like Bernacules Nerdgasm, iJustine, Jake Roper of Vsauce 3, and Gear Live. The show ran for a total of 3 seasons. Since then, he has been an avid YouTube creator, 360 animated shorts, which have gained millions of views on YouTube, as well as making appearances to educate the masses on the evolution of the social media experience. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Bacon Bits and Bites podcast. And I'm so excited today to have social media futurist, public speaker, and new media artist, Eugene Capon, on the show. Welcome, Eugene.
I'm so glad you got my last name right. Like 90% of people say like Capon, Capane, Captain, Capone.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie. I was thinking Capon, but I thought, you know what? Better than it to assume. I'm just gonna listen to watch the videos and hear how you pronounce it. Because take a look at my last name, for example. Everyone always asks me. It's either like you can ask or you can try to pronounce it. So. But anyways, before we get into the meat of the interview, I was hoping you could clarify a few terms for my majority of us were aware with VR. It's the immersive computer simulation of the 3D environment. And then AR, where there's that digital overlay in the user surroundings. So I'm guessing like people would think about like Pokemon Go. And then this is rather new to me, XR, extended reality, which encompasses the aforementioned 2 plus mixed reality. So what's extended reality and mixed reality?
Extended reality is basically the umbrella term that we use for the entire industry of VR, AR, and MR. So it's kind of like dogs versus like Shih Tzu and Pit Bull and Bulldog, right? When we talk about these different tools, we really talk about VR as in you are being teleported into another world. Your entire worldview is being changed. It's being virtually edited. Augmented reality is not just an overlay world. Your entire worldview is being changed. It's being virtually edited. Augmented reality is not just an overlay. It's actually any of your senses that are changed. So for instance, while you and I are mostly probably using like Snapchat filters on your phone or playing Pokemon Go, it's actually a much broader world out there for it. For instance, I saw this science fiction piece where somebody had an implant in their tongue and they were able to make everything taste like ice cream.
Oh.
Yeah. Or if you have some type of auditory piece and you want to make certain tones disappear or filter out through your ear, that's a type of augmentation as well. So you're augmenting your reality. Mixed reality is when you're and putting it into a digital environment separate. So it's basically the kind of like the opposite of how VR works, where
Okay.
you yourself are being put into a digital world.
Oh.
And I realize it can get a little confusing. It makes a lot more sense via mixing those realities into a single piece. Say you had a VR headset and you put a bunch of people in front of a green screen, and though you're able to like look around, the backgrounds of those people on the green screen are being digitally removed while they're being put into a digital environment, and you're
Oh,
able to perceive them in there.
interesting.
Yeah.
So as we know that VR, it had a small dose of popularity in the 1990s, and I remember going to a place near my house. It was called Palladium, and I remember being able to play like interactive games, like you were on like jet skis or you were on skis.
Mhm.
But realizing that VR phenomenon, it never really took off during that time. Like, why do you think? What do you think were some of the reasons for that?
Shitty products being taken to market.
Oh,
That
okay.
hands down, that's what it was. Like, do you remember those like 3D TVs that were all the rage for like 3 years? People were able to buy 3D TVs and like glasses came with them,
Oh,
and you were
okay.
able to basically have an at-home 3D experience at home, right? And while a lot of that technology was great, smaller companies basically flooded the market with really crummy tech, and basically it overtook the perception of that technology, and they're like, oh, I don't want to buy this, look how crummy it looks, even though some really great examples of this tech were out there. Everybody saw what was flooding the market, and basically mob mentality ensued, right? With VR, we're actually in, I think, our fourth wave
Okay.
of it. And every time, every wave, when it gets popularity, it comes for a really hard wave. And then, it's maybe it'll take off, maybe it won't. And this is finally the time that it's staying around. When we talk about VR being ingrained into our society, we actually talk about the road path to the metaverse. And we're getting a little bit closer this time, actually a lot closer than we've ever been in any of the previous waves.
We'll have to talk more about that later on in the interview. So let's get into how you got into VR. So in 2016, you quit your job as an art director to pursue XR social media. And I was watching one of your talks where you mentioned your first experience with VR. I think you're talking about how you're wearing this headset and it was in the rain. Would you consider that to be like a pivotal moment in your career path?
That was my eureka moment. That's what that was. I'm part of this community called After Effects Seattle. I came from a motion design VFX background, along with a social media background. And I was at one of these meetups. VR hadn't quite established itself with all the really big headsets yet. And a designer over at Microsoft had home built his very own 360 experience. It was a 3 degrees of freedom experience that was the Disney's Iron Giant walking over, picking you up, and walking with you in his hand.
Oh, wow.
And I had never seen anything like this before. And the experience was like, there were birds flying that weren't animated. A lot of things just didn't have textures on them. But the potential for the technology hit me so hard in that moment that I took the headset off. I was covered in sweat from this like 3-minute experience. And I was like, this is the future. Oh my God. This is what's going to happen in the future and in the very near future. And for anybody who counts themselves as a futurist, when you find something that you know is going to be huge, it's probably time to double down into that technology. So like the people who made it really big on YouTube early on were the people who got in there right as it launched, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or most notably with like TikTok, people who got really famous on TikTok were probably people who were entering the application. And most notably with like TikTok, people who got really famous on TikTok were probably people who were entering the application and making content for it right after Musical.ly got bought out. And this is no different. So I figured it was going to be the future. I saved up for my art directing job for 3 months. I quit to pursue it full time. And I got to say, it was one of the best decisions I have ever made in my life.
Did you feel like any fear or hesitation? Or
Oh,
you're
absolutely. Like I was a year and a half out of college, maybe. Like I graduated in 2014 and I was pursuing a career in YouTube. Like that was my career. And it was such a weird shift. And I was like, how do I merge the two? And so like making 360 animated films was really my path.
Mm-hmm. And so your first project,
I'm from a motion design background. I knew After Effects really well, and there was a plugin for it called Metal, and eventually Metal would be bought out by Adobe. It was created by this engineer called Chris Bobotis, and as soon as I was able to get my hands on it, I was making 360 ecto-rectangular maps and just testing in every which way I could. And it just happened to pair up very well with another plugin for After Effects called Element 3D. And Element 3D is a tool that allows you to bring in 3D models into After Effects and then animate them around. And when I was looking for every which way to get into this industry, I came across Seattle Fashion Week. And a friend of mine, Tim, he was doing some dealings with them. They were looking to try to get experimental new content industry. I came across Seattle Fashion Week, and a friend of mine, Tim, he was doing some dealings with them. They were looking to try to get experimental new content into this fashion show, and they wanted artists to create for them. And because I was so desperate to try to get everything put together and get things seen, I was like, hey, I'll go ahead. I'll make something for you. How long do I have? They're like, you have 1 month. I'm like, oh my God, that's not a lot of time. And so for 30 days, 8 hours a day at least, I was building this project called Journey VR, which for the most part is a space pod simulator. You're in a pod, you get shot out into the universe, you go past some planets, you go through an asteroid field, you go through like a rail ship. It's very visually pleasing. I hired a friend of mine named Adrian Ladelia to do the music, and it is one of the most beautiful pieces I've ever heard in my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I watched it and it just felt like so cool. Like it was, I found that the music was very like, it fit with the visuals. It's like, ooh, I'm in outer space. Like I'm going through like a meteor shower type thing.
Yeah, he asked me what I wanted. I said, "Hey man, do you know that intro like Halo theme song?" He goes, "Oh, I gotcha." And maybe like an hour or two later, he sent me this like 2-minute clip, and I'm in the car listening to it, and I'm just like crying because it's so beautiful. Well, because I was at Seattle Fashion Week showing off this piece, the people over at SIF, some of the members of the selection committee from SIF were there, and they tried it, and they're like, "Hey, we did SIF XR last year, 360 video and VR content stuff. So shout out to SIF." And it became an official selection.
Wow.
And because it was an official selection at SIF, I got to go to all the panels and stuff. And one of the panels that they had was the people over at Valve. And they were there because they were recruiting people to submit VR projects to Steam for their rentals and to get more virtual reality content onto the platform. I saw this as an opportunity. I sent them an email. I was like, hey, can you like cover the fees and stuff for submission? They're like, absolutely. We'll give you a couple of free tokens for submitting projects. Here you go. And I submitted it, and it was the #1 download for sales and rental for over 30 days. I think it was like 31, 32 days.
I was to say about your another project you produced and co-hosted Glitch, which is the first in VR talk show, and which was then ordered like a TV talk show. Can you walk us through that experience?
Yeah. So it wasn't the first in VR talk show.
Oh,
that
okay.
actually goes to there are actually a couple of different shows before us. We were the first in virtual reality talk show to be ordered as if it was a TV show.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So, there are a couple like in the garage sort of projects out there. There was this, I think, the Woo Show, which was like a kickstarted talk show, in VR talk show. And so basically what had happened is, in my approach to try to figure out this industry, try to figure out where it's all going, because I had come from a background doing YouTube videos. I was the former art director at Press Play, and I was working with some very big name YouTubers. And because of that, I had one of those like verified celebrity check marks you get on Twitter that nobody can get anymore because they don't give them out anymore. So I'm like grandfathered in, which is great. And I basically sat down and I followed every person who worked in VR that I could find. And I think it was about 200 people I was able to find. And one of the people I found just happened to be hired at a company called Altspace. And Altspace was like, hey, we're trying to put together like 16 shows. We have like Reggie Watts. We got Justin Roiland, who created this new show coming out called Rick and Morty. We have this comedy group called Josh, which is Michael Sarah Silverman, Tara Minerick. And, would you like a meeting? And I was like, yeah, that sounds amazing. And so like my eyes got really wide. I was like, okay, I'm going to go into this meeting. We did like a one-on-one. We talked about like what a talk show would actually look like. I kind of pitched it as a podcast, or like, well, podcasts already exist. We're supposed to be doing something kind of new. How about a talk show in VR? I was like, absolutely. And because it was all experimental content at Altspace, nobody was getting paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
And we did our first season. And as we were doing like our last guest of our first season, we got this email going, we need you to cancel your guest for tomorrow.
Oh my gosh.
And I called up my co-host, Topher Welsh, who created After Effects Seattle, but he had also previously been a radio talk show host. So he was like perfect to be my co-host, right? And I went, buddy, they want us to cancel our show for tomorrow. So that either means one of two things. They're either canceling us, which wouldn't make sense because they don't pay us, or two, Altspace is going under and they're going to announce it in the next couple of days. And sure enough, the very next day, they announced that Altspace was closing their doors. They were going under. And so I kind of sat down with Topher. I was like, dude, we spent all this time, all this effort, contacting every big named celebrity and YouTube that we had in our book to try to get them onto this experimental show. We didn't pay anybody. And the platform that was supporting us is going under. What do we do? And a couple weeks later, we got a call from Philip Rosedale and his team over at High Fidelity. And they went, hey, we really like your show. And that meant to us, they probably couldn't afford anybody else on that roster if they were going to like pay them. And so we had a couple of meetings and they went really, really well. And I was like, look, Altspace was plug and play with you guys. We need to like develop a set. We need to get full avatars. You guys are definitely more intricate in the way that your platform is set up. And they went, hey, we completely understand. How much to order a season from you? And we kind of went like, no one's ever ordered a season of VR before. What is that? What does that even look like? And so we talked numbers and we got a season purchased. And Topher Welsh and I, we flew down to Los Angeles and we got what was called duplication scans. And basically what we did was we stood inside of a booth, a photogrammetry booth. They took probably 56 photos all at the same time of our bodies, and they concocted a model of us that was very realistic. And actually I had used this model for a video called 100 Severed Heads. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, actually, it was in my notes because like I've watched several of your animated shorts, and that is actually my favorite one. It's like so cool. I'm like, how does he come up with this stuff?
I don't do drugs either, which is the really funny part. A lot of my friends are like, dude, you need to chill out. You should probably do some drugs.
Actually, since we're on the topic of talking about 100 Severed Heads, how do you get your ideas? Like, where do you get your inspiration from?
Sleep, honestly.
Like, you have these crazy fantastical type dreams?
Yeah, I have a very overactive imagination. Apparently childhood didn't beat that out of me. And yeah, so even like my writing pitches are up off the wall. Like, what the hell did I just read? But they're usually hilarious in the way that they're presented because it's still very commercial the way that I do it. I just wrote a pitch for like a car company, and it's one of the craziest things I've ever written, and I can't wait for them to get it because I know they're probably going to bite onto it just with how crazy it is.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever watch like the Harmon Brothers, or do you know who they are?
No, sorry, I don't.
Do you remember the commercial for Squatty Potty?
I'm not sure. Like, I'm based in Canada, so I don't know if I would get the same commercials.
Well, it was actually online. It was an online
online
commercial that went absolutely viral. It featured a prince and a pooping unicorn.
Now
And
I have to look it up.
Yeah, and this unicorn is like pooping ice cream, and they're giving these cones to children as they're talking about like why people are constipated. It's unicorn is like pooping ice cream, and they're giving these cones to children as they're talking about like why people are constipated. It's like 6-7 minutes long, I think.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. But the funny thing is, I feel like that's something a unicorn would poop out anyway, right? Like ice cream or just something fun with sprinkles.
Oh, yeah. Rainbow farts. A lot of my creative writing is very much along the same lines. All my writing is very like over the top, crazy. What the hell am I watching? Versus, hey, be sure to add your motion graphics here at the bottom. Be sure to add your SEO tags using TubeBuddy. So it's very much two-sided as far as the sort of stuff that I produce.
Interesting.
Glitched, while very visually cool and everything, was definitely more on the technical side.
Gotcha. So in addition to this, you're also
is that stock photography for people wearing VR headsets was very, very limited. Like, it just didn't exist. And the ones that did exist were like people riding bikes or laughing for like no reason. You know how like hilarious stock photos are. So I made a set with my ex-girlfriend. We just spent an afternoon. We went to the Co-Motion Labs at the University of Washington, and we made this like stock photography set, just kind of making fun of stock photography. And we put it on for free on Pexels. And it has like 5 million views now. Like, other stock photography sites were stealing the photos to repost onto theirs. So I can't even track them anymore after that happens. But we sat down, we did like a Google reverse image search, and it's everywhere. There are like all these VR companies that use my face on their stock photography for their flyers and websites and branding. Google Finance used my face talking about like the VR industry. A lot of like education companies use me as like the version of like what the American market looks like. I was actually in Canada at the Vancouver International Film Festival. And the CEO of Veer, which is this Chinese 360 version of YouTube, was actually giving a presentation talking about the creator program that they were setting up for companies to create 360 content and virtual reality content. And I walked up to her and I started a conversation with, hey, it's really nice to meet you. You guys actually used me as your, as the cover of your American market. And she goes, oh my God, I didn't know. I'm like, no, that's what it was put out there for. So even though I spent this afternoon making this like joke that I thought it was personally funny and didn't think it was going to go anywhere, it's opened up so many doors. And probably once every 2 to 3 weeks, somebody sends me like a DM or an email with a link to where they found me in the wild.
That's so funny. You're like
Yeah.
famous or extra famous because of those stock photos.
Yeah, I think Vice ran a whole campaign with my face on it at one point.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Referring to one of the talks that you gave for design reality, and I thought that was really interesting to talk. This is really interesting to discuss that you mentioned the AR and VR capability of like 5 social media platforms. So TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat, and Facebook, with I believe Facebook having the best capability thus far. So I'm just curious to know, talking about, since Facebook owns Instagram, do you foresee them increasing the XR capability of the Instagram platform?
So I gave that talk probably a year and a half ago, and they're always updating their technology in big ways. And I definitely see them getting to a point where, because Facebook owns Oculus as well, so they're basically creating their entire ecosystem, and they're slowly integrating everything in to become one. I mean, Oculus Connect is now Facebook Connect. Like they renamed their entire VR trade show basically into, being more Facebook centric. Yeah. So if you delete your Facebook account, any games that you purchased for the Oculus suddenly go away. And that's kind of alarming to me, but I understand from a business standpoint why they would do that. Facebook basically wants to be the internet, and they understand that social media platforms have a tipping point. And with those tipping points, they're going to start losing users. And you can already start to see it a little bit in Instagram.
Yep.
Social media platforms, they level out, they stop gaining traction, and then they have to basically go, hey, all right, what's next? Yep. How do we pivot? How do we create something new? And so I think Mark Zuckerberg definitely sees the metaverse as kind of that road. So they're doing Horizons. They're doing Facebook Horizons as a product. And I think it's very much a very introductory level to the metaverse. Basically, it's their own social platform. And I can just see there being more and more integration between what they're creating on the terms of XR and their AR capabilities for things like Instagram.
Speaking of the metaverse, and early on in the conversation, we were talking about like journey to the metaverse. Could you kind of expand a little bit more on that?
Yeah. So the metaverse is basically the replacement of the internet using VR.
Okay.
So do you ever watch the movie Ready Player One?
I feel like I need to watch all these things that you've mentioned. I've heard of it.
Okay. So in the movie Ready Player One, but you understand the concept. They go into a VR world, everything's interconnected, life and death situations that actually revolve around the things that are happening in the real world. Very much how the internet impacts our real life, right? Social media impacts our real life in sometimes amazing or terrible ways. And that's just part of the price we have, or for the migration to a technologically advanced plane of existence, right? So in Ready Player One, they have haptic suits where they put on so they can feel touch against each other. They have headphones that basically let you hear all around you based on location where you are in the experience. Goggles that change what you're able to see, the standard VR tropes. And as we're talking about how we're getting to a point where we're adopting those technologies into our own life now, things are actively being created. We have those VR headsets. There are haptic devices being created where you're going to be able to feel what it feels like to get shot in a video game, but against what it might feel like in real life. And as we're progressing, we really need to figure out what are the interconnected points between, say, like Facebook's Horizon and high fidelity, or what is it going to take for us to get a seamless transition between, say, Beat Saber to Horizons or high fidelity. So right now we're working on getting those pieces produced. We're making sure that PCs can run at a high enough rate to not cause sickness. We're working on standalone VR headsets that don't require expensive PCs, that link seamlessly against other in VR, walk through one door and end up in another program. And it seems as if it was seamless, right? As if it was part of the same level. Those are all things that we need for us to be able to get to the metaverse.
So, as you know, with the pandemic, it's caused a lot of industries to either tank or a lot of them to thrive or to accelerate. So, with the pandemic, do you feel that the XR industry has like accelerated or become more popular? And the reason why I'm asking this is because a lot of pretty much almost all of the events when it was during lockdown, they went online. So people originally thought like Zoom, but then they're trying to think how can they make these conferences and events more experiential. So do you think, like, have you seen like a surge with respect to like things happening in the VR industry?
Absolutely. I like to tell people we went from a gig economy to a live economy almost overnight, right?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. So versus, you might go out and work an event, right? Say you need like extra money and you're like, I'm a security guard. You might work at a EDM festival and, you might earn money that way. Well, jobs like that, they don't exist anymore. Anybody who was doing anything on versus like brick and mortar stores had to take their business online, whether it's e-commerce or live video streaming. And we see that no different with events. So like one of the most attended events ever was the Travis Scott Fortnite concert, right? 12.3 million people logged in to watch this one event. I mean, how many people showed up to Paradiso? A couple 100,000, right? I mean, when you take things to a virtual plane, your ability to scale isn't limited by the physical realm, right? So as we're looking to take these things in XR to bigger places, we have to consider what can it replace? What are things we can actively replace, save money-wise by doing it online, and then make sure that the ability to adopt those practices are for the long term. Now, the pandemic was absolutely, came out of nowhere, right? Kind of all took us off by surprise. But people in my industry, we were able to migrate very easily because we kind of were already doing this. We were already having meet and greets in VR chat or Altspace. We were already live streaming our lectures through YouTube and Twitch. It's a brave new world, but it's one that I'm not surprised for Altspace. We were already live streaming our lectures through YouTube and Twitch. It's a brave new world, but it's one that I'm not surprised happened.
Yeah, it just accelerated all of this. And with respect to like other industries, I know there's been like a huge boom in online education, which has got people to reimagining the way traditional education was like very costly, and you have to be in a space or attend lectures for 4 years. So do you feel like VR has the potential to take it to the next level to make it more immersive? Because as of right now, the majority of online courses I'm seeing, like there's videos and you take the course and you download it versus, I guess having a more experiential type course.
If we can get courses migrated into XR, into VR specifically, there is a really, really good case for learning in VR over traditional campus. And it is responsible for taking your long-term or your short-term memory and converting it into long-term memory, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of years ago, we found out that in that section of the brain, inside the hippocampus, we have what are called GPS cells. And those are your evolutionary cells, basically allowing you to find your way back home at the end of the day. So that would have been to your tribe, to your cave, to your hut. And now it's to drive your car home or how to take the bus home, right? And what we found out is when you're in VR, those GPS cells fire off frequently and randomly, allowing you to remember more inside of virtual reality. There's an estimation that it's up to even 30%.
Wow.
So if you're going to learn a course, do it in VR. Need to learn a new language and you have a big test coming up, do it in VR, because learn a course, do it in VR. Need to learn a new language and you have a big test coming up, do it in VR, because odds are you're probably going to retain more information much more quickly.
Yeah, I find a lot of times when I just read something, I'll read it and like, what did I just read?
And then you got to read the page back over.
Yeah. So that totally makes sense.
But there are people who play video games and can remember every little secret of it, right? But then they can't remember what they had for breakfast the morning before.
So I was doing some more research and I didn't realize that Apple is investigating how how
Air.
VR and AR can be implemented into their devices or new hardware products. And apparently there's rumors that they're creating some sort of headset and then AR smart glasses, with the latter being I feel the idea it doesn't sound so far-fetched, but at the same time it's AR and VR capability.
I'm getting ready for the point where instead of glasses, we have contact lenses.
Oh, wow.
Or I saw this video of them implanting AR lenses directly into your eyeball.
Oh my gosh, I don't know about that.
Oh man, it was like a needle poke and then it just popped into place after it came out of the needle.
Oh wow.
And I'm waiting for the point where you have these lenses and they're connected to, say, your smartphone. And if we have a high enough connection, say 6G, where you're able to get, I did the math at one point, it was 32 terabytes a second of information. You can basically get Lord of the Ring view.
What?
Yeah. Do you know what that is? Have you ever heard of that?
No, but it sounds really cool.
So you have these lenses, and we might end up with a pair of AR glasses that does this long before contact lenses. That basically it maps out the room that you're in, and then it seamlessly puts over brand new maps over everything. So it basically looks like you're in Lord of the Rings.
Oh,
yeah. So you can basically change your entire reality based on phone settings.
Wow, that's next level. So I actually from watching all of your videos, I feel like I'm learning so many new things, and it just makes me want to ask more questions to learn more.
Then I'm doing it right.
It's what is this? Because again, the concept I have of VR was so limited. Again, just thinking back to the 90s and just what I'm seeing now with or what I was seeing originally with headsets. So again, in one of your other talks, you mentioned the rise of VR personalities, and correct me if I'm wrong. Originally, I thought it was a VR personality that would replace a human being, but from the case studies, I think they were just actual people, but they created VR experiences with their own brand.
So this is a wide open talk, and I'm gonna have to take off my glasses for this. So having digital influencers is nothing new.
Right.
We've had Miku, we've had Gorillaz, we've had the band Death Clock. These are all bands who do not exist, and yet their music is so amazing that it's generated millions upon millions upon millions of dollars, right? Mm-hmm. Now, what if the technology gets so good and so accessible, the average person can just replace their digital self in their YouTube streaming, in making videos, in any content where you would have a major influencer? You now have a digital representation of what that person might be. And you can create an illusion of what that person might be. and you can create entire worlds and experiences around them, right? So even with like League of Legends, they turned a bunch of their characters into K-pop bands, right?
It's hilarious.
I mean that's just one version of it. And doing it inside of VR is no different. There was a lot of backlash for a streamer called Pokimane not too long ago because she decided to be a digital avatar for a day. And people are like, "Oh, I want to see your face. That's why I subscribed." Like, well, it's a good way of taking the day off so you don't have to put on, real clothes. You can stay in pajamas and still perform, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to spend 2 hours putting makeup and making sure that your hair is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a huge case for it.
So can you foresee then,
Or music are kind of the big two avenues I see, where instead of having, paying a model to go all around the world, you might have a team of VFX artists remaking clothes, putting them onto a digital avatar that fits like that model or whoever the model is, and then creating content around that model wearing that clothes. And then you can just pose them into whatever position you want. You can export that to fashion covers or I don't know, Instagram or Twitter, or, get it ready for holograms to be shown up on fashion runways. There are no limitations, I don't think. Or the only limitation is the creativity put behind it and the limitations of the current level of technology that we have.
and for the current influencers, is this something
It and the limitations of the current level of technology that we have.
and for the current influencers, is this something you would highly recommend them getting into to like stay relevant or to like remain competitive?
Eventually, influencers tend to age out.
Okay.
So like the heartthrob tween is going to become an adult, right? But say that kid gets to like 17, becomes like a digital version of themselves, and then stops, whatever they're normally doing, stops gaming, or they start gaming with that version of themselves being put forth for the public consumption. If you want like the heyday version of a specific actor, I mean, you can do a digital composition of whatever that person's face is, and then say if they die, you can just take that model, put it onto another actor, and you still have that award-winning actor, being portrayed, and still has that like star power, right? For instance, Sean Connery died.
Yeah.
Very sad. But if we had the technology to basically do a photogrammetry scan of his face in like his heyday, he could still be playing Bond. He could be playing Bond for the next 50 years, long after he's gone. I mean, now there are some moral dilemmas with using a dead actor. I think Carrie Fisher or a younger Carrie Fisher is probably a really good example because it didn't quite look real and there was a lot of backlash around it. But if they sign on as like, hey, I want to be X character, and in my death, you can continue to use my likeness as long as my family gets the money later on. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
So I want to transition over to you being a VR evangelist, and I feel like you've already answered a lot of this already in our discussion so far, but to ask you point blank, why is being an educator in VR so important to you?
Being an educator in VR is who I am. It's what I do. It's what I breathe. It's what I personally get excited about. And if I can make what I get excited about my job, I don't feel like I'm actually working, right? I mean, it's an industry that I absolutely love. I love the technology. I love the possibilities. I love the community that's built around it. And if I can continue to express everything I feel about this industry to other people, maybe my community will grow to be a little bit bigger.
Amazing. So how would you say that VR affects our emotions? And do you feel it's something that can be used to help create empathy?
Absolutely. In one of my very early treks into VR, I volunteered to work at SIFX. And originally did it because I thought I'm going to get to try video games that have never been released and see crazy badass films. And that was not the case at all. I was put into this section of the event that featured 6 Nani de la Pena experiences, who is this, I believe she's a Latina immersive journalist with 20 years of journalism experience. So she very well-rounded, very like charismatic as far as headsets and Unity and whatever else she was making it in. It was amazing. But the content that she was making was incredibly serious. There was a domestic abuse experience where the audio was from a real 911 call.
Oh my gosh.
There was an experience based off of an event that actually happened where somebody in line at a food bank in LA died of starvation while in line. There was a Syrian refugee experience where you play somebody whose village is getting bombed by the United States, and you're just in a marketplace and you're wearing a haptic rumble pack on your chest. So when the bombs drop and the dust hits you in the face, you can feel it.
Oh my gosh.
There was another experience where you're a woman going through Planned Parenthood for an abortion. And there are protesters. Dust hits you in the face, you can feel it.
Oh my gosh.
There was another experience where you're a woman going through Planned Parenthood for an abortion. And there are protesters outside trying to prevent you from getting in.
It's really interesting that you mentioned these type of experience because I think the majority of people, and myself included, originally seeing like XR as something is more of like to entertain and to be like a form of art versus these traumatic experiences.
I think XR is the greatest technology for empathy to ever be created. You can literally see the world through another person's eyes, and with such level of detail that anything else is second to none.
Mm-hmm.
Even if we try to put things into, documentaries and whatever else, it still doesn't compare. I mean, you're still the way that your head moves. I mean, it's going to keep you immersed.
All right. So if people want to get in touch with you and learn more about what you do, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Capon Design, just like it's spelled. You can go to my speaker website, hightechinfluencer.com, or you can check out my production company, Studio Capon, at studiocapon.com.
Awesome. Oh, I almost forgot. And I know that you also have an ebook out, Get Serious About Social Media, and a new vlog channel.
That's right. It's a free ebook. It basically talks about how to create your base content and then what your distribution network should look like as far as the sort of content that you make. I also go over a litany of different social media platforms that you should be using, why you should be using them, and then how you can migrate content to basically take one piece of content and get like 50 out of it.
Well, thank you so much for this really fun and insightful conversation. I learned a lot, and I know that the audience will get a lot out of it.
Thank you for having me, Karen. It was fun.
Yeah, it was. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and stay tuned for more episodes. Ciao for now. Thanks again for tuning into the Bacon Bits and Bytes podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who may also enjoy listening to it. I would love it if you could subscribe to the podcast or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. You can follow along on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook at Bacon Bits and Bytes. And on Twitter, it's baconbits_bytes. Ciao for now.